If you remember me making a video about this game a while back and can't find it anymore, it's because I privated the old one. It wasn't a great video and it could have been much better. It's also pretty outdated, so I felt the need to make an update to it. I would have done so sooner, but when I made my Wolf Among Us Andersen Street video, its views paled in comparison to my Walking Dead videos. Normally, I'm not one to care for views or whatever, but it was clear that more people were interested in The Walking Dead. Then Telltale shut down and, by extension, Wolf 2 was cancelled. And I no longer felt the need to make a video for it, even though it's a series I like. But hey, we're here now in 2020. Great year so far. Ad Hoc, a company made up of arguably some of the best talent who worked at Telltale and on the original Wolf Among Us, will be making the sequel, which gives me high hopes that it will be good, especially since they're being given ample time to make the game and not being rushed. My hope is that they have a solid direction of where it is they want to go, design-wise and tonally, because if it's anything like the first, it's going to be an almost incomprehensible clusterfuck. So I don't think you'll be at all surprised if I tell you that The Wolf Among Us had a pretty troubled development. It went through many revisions and rewrites, most of which aren't entirely known to the public. In case you aren't aware, The Wolf Among Us was in active development from early 2011, but the game didn't release until October 2013, a year after the proposed release date. When Wolf first began as a project, it was designed more similarly to the other games that Telltale had done before, like the Sam & Max series or Back to the Future. It was a lot of point and clicking, puzzle solving and good humour. At the time, both The Walking Dead and The Wolf Among Us were being developed concurrently. When The Walking Dead shipped in April 2012 and sold better than any Telltale game before it, the team that was working on Wolf shifted over to help the people who were working on The Walking Dead, and Wolf was left with very few people. The game was still being worked on though, rather slowly, but it still had a few dedicated people on the project. It's hard to say just how much of the game was developed in this time, but given what I've seen and heard over the years, I'd wager pretty strongly that the first episode was a good way in, arguably even close to completion. Then, something big happened. The Walking Dead exploded, and it sent Telltale into the limelight. They became a brand name in the gaming industry, for better or worse, and received all sorts of accolades and praise from new fans and critics alike. Of course, there were quite a few jaded, hardcore old TTG fans, but they were effectively gobbled up by the newer fanbase. Telltale, having finally reached a massive point of success in their many years of game development, started to reevaluate what their business model was. It was decided that if they were to continue to be successful, they'd need to change the formula. I don't need to tell you what we know now in hindsight. Let's just say that didn't work out as well as they thought. Obviously, this had a drastic effect on the Wolf Among Us project, and especially the Wolf team. It was decided by the management that Wolf should be more similar to how The Walking Dead played. More cinematic, more about choices, and basically whatever they thought was a good idea, whether it was or wasn't. They believed in order to make another successful game, it had to mimic The Walking Dead. Telltale had no hope in their traditional style of point-and-click games, so all the work on the original storyline was effectively scrapped, and the project began anew with different writers and designers. It went through a few different revisions in this time as the team tried to figure out how they could make a Fables game work in the style of The Walking Dead, which brings us to this video. You see, The Wolf Among Us, despite tossing their old storyline and gameplay in the garbage, still kept and used most of their assets in the final game. I'll be talking a little bit about those, and more notably, talking about the original version of the story of Clorinda. The first thing we should get out of the way is that The Wolf Among Us went through multiple different revisions and went through so many changes, it's honestly insane. At one point, it was described as being an unshippable game, months before its release. But for this specific video, I'll be talking about what I know was a fleshed out story idea. The idea was a story involving a woman named Clorinda. So who is Clorinda? Clorinda is the name of one of Cinderella's stepsisters. This Clorinda story was being worked on as early as April 2012. There's evidence of this, funnily enough, in the credits for the first episode of The Walking Dead, where it actually mentions the original name for episode 1, Death of a Stepsister. Unfortunately, all we really have to go on are bits and pieces of what they left over. We were pretty lucky with the entire Andersen Street scene in the files, likely because it was cut very late. But thankfully, unlike The Walking Dead, Telltale were a lot more relaxed about cleaning their archives, and we've got dialogue, textures and models to sift through. Here's the thing though, stuff that they didn't cut out was usually reused for other purposes. For example, you remember this red-haired guy you see throughout the game? Well, according to this article by Games Radar, he was originally supposed to be Bigby's deputy, the Crier, aka the boy who cried wolf. He'd be there to prompt Bigby about things and act as someone for Bigby to roll ideas off of. In the end, he's pretty much relegated to being a weird background character that ends up in all sorts of places for no good reason. That's just one example of many. Tiny Tim is also present in the very first episode, but does pretty much nothing except weird taxi driver roles like the Crier until episode 4 where he finally gets a voice. As for Clorinda, there are next to no references of her in the final game at all. In the game files, they left over an early placeholder texture with the names of her family. Herself, Gloriana, her sister, her mother Livia, and of course, Cinderella. According to that Games Radar article I mentioned before, Telltale spoke about an early storyline that involved Bigby investigating the murder of Cinderella's stepsister, and with it came an image of what we can assume is Clorinda lying dead in a bathtub. We can also find early texture images of her apartment which were painstakingly annoying to put together properly. There's a desk, a stereo cabinet, an apartment wall arc, a bathroom window, a front door texture, ceiling, and finally the placeholder family photo. The bathroom texture confirms that it was her apartment that she was killed in. Beyond that though, well, there's nothing. Despite being a major part of this older story, Clorinda is absolutely nowhere to be found. Her model or apartment are nowhere to be seen in the game files, and despite many other things being recycled for the story in the final game, anything about Clorinda is absent. But there are still leftovers related to Clorinda from this older story. Like, for example, her mother, Livia. Strangely, Livia's model was left over in the game files, and she does actually appear once in the game, in the next time on for episode 1. Unfortunately, there's not that much to say about her. Her model is a bit glitchy and it doesn't work all that well with the game's lighting. She doesn't have any specific or unique animations, except for her sitting down at the business office. That said, we do have 2 lines of uncontextualized dialogue for her, unvoiced, of course. It seems as though Livia was keen on changing the law against fables showing themselves openly to the wider public. Her next line of dialogue is more interesting though. She mentions she didn't know if Clorinda owned something. Something that the adversary had. What that something is, I have no idea. There's also another character that we know for sure was meant to be part of this story, and in a much larger way than you could probably imagine. And that character is, of course, Cinderella. As I was making this video, a ton of new information came out about not just this character, but the story of Clorinda. It's been pretty hard to format both the script and video to account for this new information, so I'm firstly going to show you the assets we've got, then we'll talk about this new info. Just keep in mind that I was writing this video before the new information came out. In the business office in episode 1, there are 2 images that reference Cinderella's old importance to the story. The Book of Symbols clearly displays Cinderella and the glass slipper, and the Book of Records also shows Cinderella on the left side of Faith. I don't think I really need to explain the story of Cinderella, but I'll just read out what they've said here as a refresher. Cinderella, also known as Cindy, and there's some black text covering the rest. The reason for this is because in the Fables comics, Cinderella is a spy, so her other aliases are classified. Cinderella was born into a life of servitude, forced by her stepmother and her two stepsisters to perform countless menial chores day and night. One late afternoon, Prince Charming invited all the kingdom's young ladies to a promenade. Cinderella wailed in anguished despair until her magically endowed fairy godmother appeared and transformed the Wait, does that say Fiari? It says Fiari godmother. Cinderella wailed in anguished despair until her magically endowed fairy godmother appeared and transformed the poor girl from a common house servant to a beautiful maiden. Aided by enchantments, she attended the ball, but under the condition she returned by the stroke of midnight, as her deceptions would not hold one momentary instant past said time. The dance was, of course, a splendid success. She entranced the whole palace, wooed the spry prince, but, in her haste to return to her cottage before she degenerated back to her rags, accidentally left a glass slipper behind. The prince, so captivated by the stranger, fitted the slipper on each girl in the land, until they were reunited again. Cinderella's involvement in the final game isn't just references by textures, she even has a model that goes used. You might remember seeing Cinderella walking past Bigby in the intro to every episode. But that's not her only appearance. In the next time on for episode 1, there's a short scene where we see Cinderella with Georgie, Nerissa, and her stepmother Olivia. The reason I bothered to reiterate Cinderella's backstory is so that you understand how things have changed. Just like Colin no longer hates Bigby, I imagine that Cinderella has forgiven her stepmother and stepsisters. This is why we see Olivia and Cinderella together, as they're likely on friendly terms, or at least motivated to work together and find out what happened to Clorinda. That said, I can't say with 100% certainty that this scene is from the Clorinda story. But here's the really strange part. You see, it was later discovered that there are animations in, no, not this game, not The Walking Dead, not any of Telltale's future games, but in fact, Cindy animations from Poker Night 2. What the hell are they doing there? There really is no excuse for these animations to be here. Another curiosity is that Bigby has lines in Poker Night 2. Sort of. Except, they don't really sound like things you'd say while playing a card game. They don't make much sense, right? Are these from the Clorinda story? And if so, once again, why are they in Poker Night 2? There are Cinderella animations in the Files of Wolf for pretty much every episode. They're very generic stuff though, like lip sync or facial expressions, which pretty much everyone has. That said, there are a few interesting animations that are definitely unused, spread throughout the files. Curiously, there are gun animations for Tweedledee and Dum, where they're shooting at Cindy and also where they're being disarmed. But it's only the gun animations that remain. Going back to Clorinda, while we don't have her apartment level in the files, there's surprisingly a few chores left over from this scene. A chore, I should explain, is basically a file that contains a set of instructions for the game to follow. What these chores contain are coordinates for the characters and objects to be placed, animations for characters, camera settings, as well as subtitles and voice lines. They're small cutscenes, pretty much. Thankfully, we're actually able to view them with some chore swapping. And they sort of work. I say sort of work because the game is calling on things that no longer exist. What that means is that if we play them, Bigby will be placed in coordinates where something was in Clorinda's apartment. Bigby at least can play the animations, but because we don't have any leftover text or dialogue from this scene, it'll look like he's speaking but with nothing coming out. In this scene, it's pretty clear Bigby is talking to someone. That person is in fact the crier. We've also got special effect chores that showcase the different effects that were meant to play in the game. A big part of the original version of Wolf was Bigby's ability to use smell, something that is sparingly ever mentioned in the final game. There's a UI icon for it and many scent effects, as well as one that is specific to Clorinda. It obviously doesn't tell us all that much, but Bigby probably would have trailed the scent somewhere and commented on it. And that's it. We've got pretty much nothing else to work with. We've looked at everything that there was left over from this older version of the story. So what more could there possibly be to talk about? Well, until somewhat recently, nothing. That was until about 2 years ago, I found something truly insane. Something that has to be seen to be believed. When I first found this, I could not believe what I was seeing. There is just so much to talk about in this 1.5-minute video. We have to analyse it. The reason I'd never seen this video before was because the animation company credited in the video is actually completely absent from the credits of the game. Probably because none of their shit got used. But the funny thing is, this video has been around since the first episode of Wolf released back in 2013. It's been there for 7 years and nobody found it until I did about 2 years ago. So anyway, let's start from the beginning of the video. So clearly this scene is without a doubt Clorinda's bathroom. Going back to the image again, you can see similarities in the placement of the objects in this scene. The bathtub close by, the tissues next to the toilet, and the products on top of it. The second shot with Bigby at the window is interesting. Thank God that they showed us the front side, because otherwise I'd have assumed this was just the hallway of Bigby's apartment. But when the camera turns round, it's incredibly difficult to notice, but this is definitely still Clorinda's apartment. I can say that because it doesn't resemble any location in the game whatsoever. But what really sells it is the lamp on the right side. It's exactly the same as the lamps in the bathroom. From the looks of it, it seems like Clorinda lived in a pretty well-off place. The scene with the earring is something I'll discuss in the next video. This character shown here is Georgie. The animation showcases his older model and he seems frightened by something? I'm not really sure what's going on. I guess maybe Bigby's threatening Georgie with violence if he doesn't give him information, perhaps about Clorinda. The next shot is just... it makes no sense. I cannot for the life of me ever understand why Bigby would shove snow like that. I do have a theory, but it'll have to wait to my next video because I don't want to take up more time than is necessary. The shot of Georgie sitting at a table is interesting because that animation does actually exist in the files, and specifically mentions it happens at a cafe. Of course, there is no cafe in the game at all. Yet another cut level. But let's get to the meat of this, and that's Cinderella's appearance. Seeing her in the pink suit blew my mind. There is not a single reference anywhere in the game or its files of her wearing anything other than her checkered black and white outfit. But I want you to forget about all of that for a minute and ask yourself the real important question. Why are we seeing this? Think about it. This story is about Bigby, right? We never see anybody but Bigby's perspective throughout the story. Yet here we're just casually watching an entire scene play out, where Cinderella gets into a fight with Dee and then gets shot and presumably killed. But wait. That doesn't make any sense either, does it? What about the animations of Cinderella disarming the Tweedles? I get the impression that this is a fail cutscene, like when you don't hit a QTE in time. There's the other shot where Dee hits her off the scaffolding and laughs. This also looks like a fail cutscene to me. The other thing I want to point out are the boots that Cinderella's wearing. Why? Well, because another video was uploaded this year by ex-Telltale animator Armando Luch, showcasing his work at Telltale, some of which includes never before seen Cindy animations. Here we can see Cindy escaping from the falling scaffolding, but pay close attention to the fact that she isn't wearing the feathered boots. She does some gymnastic stuff and lands below to a location that could possibly be the cafe. The next shot shows Dee whacking Cinderella off the building with the feathered boots falling off. It looks like she was about to put them on before she was hit. I'm guessing the next scene from here would be her landing down at the scaffolding and getting into a fight with Dee. But notice that there's two possibilities here. She can either get hit off the scaffolding, or she jumps down to safety as it falls. All of this leads credence to my theory that what I was talking about was a fail QTE cutscene. Which now begs the question, does this mean that we were originally going to play as Cinderella too? Did Telltale seriously cut an entire playable main character from their story? Look, I like Wolf. It's a good game. It's got a fantastic atmosphere, great music, a slick art style. But I would not call its story a masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination. It's a mystery game where the main character doesn't really solve the mystery. He just conveniently stumbles into the answer. It's a game about choices where none of your choices really matter. Things are brought up and promptly disregarded and forgotten, like the tarot cards in the business office. It was clearly not a planned out story at all, and it shows. In a way, it's kind of amazing that Wolf turned out as well as it did. given how much we know it changed. What really made Wolf stand out was its characters, atmosphere, music, and voice acting. Perhaps this older version of the story didn't have any of these things done right. I can certainly say that for pretty much everything that Telltale has done after The Walking Dead, most of the stuff they changed or cut should never have been cut or changed at all. But maybe in this case, the right call was made. I don't know. The last thing to talk about in terms of assets is a discovery that I made earlier this year relating to voice lines. So, let's talk about them. The game files for the PS3 version of Wolf Episode 4, In Sheep's Clothing, contain some incredibly early voice lines from this early version of the story, where Bigby is interrogating Beast, asking him what he was doing and where he was, on the night of Clorinda's murder. Before I play them, it should be noted that we only have Beast's answers to Bigby's questions. But there's also something else you should know. Adam Harrington, the voice of Bigby, is the one voicing Beast in this scene. As it turns out, Adam Harrington originally auditioned for Beast as well. This was officially confirmed by the man himself in a recent stream I'll be talking about in just a bit. The reason for the strange accent he's putting on is that he's trying to affect a surfer dude kind of voice. Just wanted to clear that up so you aren't confused. So, let's listen.
What the hell's going on, Bigby? Last night, I was, drinking at the Roadhouse. All night. It was a rough day. Jeez, I don't know. I got off work around 7:30 and went straight there, so about 7:45 or so. Around closing time, I guess. So maybe 2 in the morning? Closed? Are you kidding me? Shit. Open every damn night for 70 years, and the one night I actually need 'em. Okay, I'll tell you, but please don't tell my wife. I was at the Coliseum. Well, Jack said, yeah, but listen, it wasn't a blood sport. It was actually a charity fight. Ricky Tikki Tavi versus Mr. Toad, with all the proceeds going to buy toys for the kids on the farm. I bet on the fight. Lost my whole paycheck. If Beauty finds out, well, he wouldn't like me when she's angry. Who else? Toad sticks to the Queensbury rules. He doesn't have a chance. Never trust Jack. I know, right? I mean, I expected the kicking, but the grappling? Who knew? Haltier. Oh, you mean Chloe. She's my therapist.
Chloe? That's gotta be Clorinda, right? So it seems like she was a therapist. Well, that explains her grand apartment. It also explains why Bigby is questioning Beast. Bigby probably picked up on Beast leaving his scent in Clorinda's bathroom. That sounds way more gross than I ever intended it to be. Sorry.
Well, it was supposed to be couples therapy, but I couldn't get Beauty to go. Not really. Chloe has a discount rate for Fables, and I paid for it out of my allowance. It's the only money I can spend without an argument. Huh? Oh yeah, I do remember going there last night. Sort of. I was in a panic about gambling away my paycheck, and I wanted her advice about how to spin it to Beauty. Okay, that's it. Tell me what's going on or we're done here. Look, I'm not saying another word until you tell me what the hell's going on here. As far as I know, I haven't done anything illegal. If you won't tell me why I'm here, I'm done talking. Grump all you want, I haven't done anything wrong. And until you tell me what's going on, I'm keeping my mouth shut. What? Why the hell didn't you say something? How? When? Oh my God. Last night. I guess it must have been about 9. I went there right after the fight. What? No. Hell no! She was my friend! What? Jesus, you want me to rat out my wife? Okay, first of all, do I look like a goddamn Bigfoot right now? Because if Beauty thought I was cheating on her, I guarantee you I would. And secondly, Beauty's bookstore was open until midnight last night, and she was there until it closed. That's why I had the night to myself. Jeez, I don't know. I got off work about 7:30, and I went straight there, so about 7:45 or so. That part was the truth. I left work at 7:30, so I probably got there around 7:45. I was only there for a few minutes, so maybe 9:15. Well, I can't believe I have to say this, but she was alive. She wasn't happy to see me. Drunk client showing up after hours? Of course she wasn't, but she let me use her bathroom. Actually, we talked about what happened while I was in the bathroom. Someone else came by. I don't actually know, but from what I could hear from the bathroom, it was some guy I didn't recognize. I couldn't make out much. He said something like, "Where is she?" But Clory seemed real angry. Not much. She said she couldn't tell me what it was about because it involved another one of her clients. You don't really believe I could have killed Clory, do you? You know why no one likes you, Bigby? Because of crap like that.
Someone else came by. Well, unfortunately, we've got no clue about who that could be, because sadly that's where the audio ends. And that was pretty much the end of my video. I had nothing left to show or talk about and began working on it. That was until 2 very recent charity streams with people who worked on The Wolf Among Us came around in support of JRDF, the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. The first stream wasn't as fruitful as both Dennis Lenar and Nick Herman didn't work on the Clorinda story, so they didn't have too much to say about it. The second stream, however, where Adam Harrington, the voice of Bigby, Jared Emerson Johnson, the composer for pretty much every Telltale game, and Julian Koneski, voice and sound director for a ton of Telltale games, revealed quite a bit of interesting information regarding Wolf's development. Some of the things they talked about I was aware of, others I wasn't. For example, Adam spoke about how he auditioned for Beast.
So many multiple versions of it, but even like there was an early version, and then when making episode 1, even it was evolving over the course of that production for a while, like as we were recording.
Absolutely, yeah. And it was funny because Adam was in 1.0,
Right,
and he was Beast, and it was a surfer.
yeah.
So he's been there from the beginning.
Big man, what's the problem?
What's going on, man?
As you've just heard, I found this out just a few months ago, but it's nice to have confirmation. What I didn't know is that apparently he also played the Crooked Man at one point.
And they're for sale.
Don't forget I was Crooked Man too. Georgie.
Georgie.
Julian and Jared actually mentioned that they still have all of the old music and voiceover from the earlier builds of the game, and thought about perhaps releasing it, but said they would have to get the go-ahead from the new Telltale people since they technically own the license to the assets.
And then as we walk around and check out the scenery here, there's another question that came through. Do you guys have any audio files or music left over from the original version of Wolf? Hearing Jared describe what the soundtrack was set to sound like makes me really curious to hear it now.
I do have all of it. I'm not sure if it would be acceptable for me to share it with the world, unfortunately. I think it is now property of Telltale 2.0, technically. But I will ask and see, because I don't know if anyone actually cares. So if I can get approval to release it. It's all
Sorry, Snow, but
piano
this is
sketches.
important. I have something to tell you.
Really,
stuff,
Bigby?
but it
It's
was
so
very
important it can't wait 15 minutes
different
until
take.
it's made.
Yeah.
Not
But I
at
have
the
all of
worst
it.
possible time.
And there's quite a bit of it.
So it's there.
Oh, it exists.
I'm sorry, everyone. I don't.
I've got everything in my archive.
Holly, wait.
I honestly think this would be absolutely amazing. I would love to hear tracks we've never heard before, as well as hearing how these characters originally sounded. And maybe we could learn a little bit more about who and what the Clorinda story entailed. If this is something you'd like to hear too, it might be a good idea to politely email Telltale about allowing this to happen. Please don't harass anybody I've mentioned here. They were nice enough to tell us this stuff. Let's not make them want to never speak to us ever again. That aside, the theory I had as I was making this video has now been officially confirmed. Cinderella was indeed supposed to be another playable main character alongside Bigby. But not just Cindy, apparently even Mr. Toad was a playable character in an older version of the story. This info came from Mark Darren, who mentioned working on an incredibly early draft before the game was even called The Wolf Among Us. He said it wasn't fully fleshed out at this point, but rather that it was an exploration of the mechanics, as well as mentioning how magic mushrooms were an important part of the plot. Speaking of which, he posted on Twitter a while back showing off a kind of early document of how he envisioned the smell mechanics for Wolf would have worked. The document itself mentions the stepsister, which basically confirms it involved Clorinda. But from looking at what I know and have shown here, is that the story Mark is talking about actually was fleshed out. There's not just a few leftover strings here, there's textures, models, music, voice lines, levels, and fully animated sequences. And just so we're clear, I'm not calling him out or anything. It's pretty cool of him to talk about any of this in the first place. He's a talented game designer and developer, and he clearly knows more than I do about Wolf's development. But from what I know, this first chapter was almost fully realised, if not complete. It's a fact that it was stopped because of the massive success of The Walking Dead, as that game became the template for every other Telltale game to follow. Perhaps it was for the best. Maybe this story was too convoluted with multiple protagonists, and maybe reducing it down to just Bigby was the smart move. They did some pretty cool stuff with Bigby. But there's just something really fascinating about seeing something familiar being drastically different. Part of the reason I make videos is to share that feeling with other people. Sometimes people are bitter at the changes, other times they appreciate what they experienced instead. Either way, I hope I was able to make you feel something in this video. I hope you'll stick around for the second part of this video, where we'll talk about another elusive character and story, as well as just go over bits and pieces not mentioned here. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.
For Wolf Among Us, I was Wachowski, and it was it was just kind of a joke. I did like 5 or 6 lines, and then
You were a cab driver or something, right?
no, it was I think I was a cop. I was a cop, and then but what was funny is that then the next writer would take over the next episode, and they would say, "Okay, what characters do I have?" And they had no idea that it was me. And all of a sudden, Wachowski had this huge. Nick talked about it in when they were on, and someone it got cut from the game, thank God. But some wonderful person found it.
Yeah.
On YouTube.
Yeah, it is. They modded out the whole thing, the whole deleted stuff. It's all there.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you're kidding me. That's
Oh, it's out there.
They linked it last week. Yeah.
Kelsey's out there too, I'm sure.